Service will be more and more and more. Okay, this is, well, I mean,
every day. Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning.
Pepperoni and cheese, I think, is what is a staple in the eggs. I've never heard of anybody putting pepperoni in eggs before, but
Sounds good.
he likes it. So,
Put you down for 3. Either 3 dozen, I don't know what it'll be, 3
Those
dozen
bags.
cookies.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh.
Yeah. Did you get bags?
No.
Okay,
Do I
they're in the foyer there.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think you need to bring 3 dozen and 1.
Oh, really? Thought you were on a diet. I'll remember that.
I'm always on a diet. I eat whatever there's in front of me.
Thank you, Cindy.
The diets, they come and go. They just, it's hard. It's hard when you're moving and you're trying to get rid of food. I know that being raised largely by my grandparents who experienced the Depression, I just can't throw food out.
No, I know. No, I know so too.
I just can't do it.
You made it.
So,
Well, that kind of has to be, I think that you guys.
That's right.
That has to be rough to pack up at this age.
it's miserable. I'm hating it.
I'm sure
I
you
really am. I just, don't even get me started on it. But at this point in my life too, I like the adventure, but I'm just tired of doing it. And at this point in my life, I'd like to be settled.
I can understand.
So this will be our 14th house we've lived in,
Oh, my.
and our 9th state to live in.
Oh, well, you have
So-
me beat on that, but I've had a lot of moves in my life.
Yeah.
My husband was a manager for a W.T. Grant store,
Oh,
and we moved once a year.
oh,
In fact, one year, he was transferred, I think, to 3 different stores, but we were lucky because where we lived, he
It
was
was centralized.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Well, that was a good store. You know, if you move a lot, then you don't accumulate.
No, you
not
do.
junk.
No, you
not
still
do
do.
Oh, yes, you do.
Yeah, you do.
No,
I've
Because-
lived in like 27 different
Oh,
homes.
geez.
First 4 years of our marriage, we never lived any place longer than 6 months.
Oh, my.
You know, once
The-
I got the last curtains up.
The problem with living in different parts of the country is that you keep stuff because you think that you don't need in other parts of the country, but you think, well, what if we move back to another part of the country where I'm going to need
I
this?
understand fully.
So I moved snow blowers a number of times in Texas. Who needs a snow blower in Texas? I had cross-country skis in Texas, and I did try to sell those at a garage sale, and no one looked at them, and I can understand why, unless you want to go cross-country skiing on. There was a poster years ago I saw, Ski Texas, and it was a picture of a guy in full snow gear doing a flip over a herd of cows. So guess what you were skiing on?
Well, if you live closer to West Texas, though, I mean, there's cows and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's cows, so, but
But that's not cross-country, that's.
no, that's downhill, and I've got downhill skis. I don't have cross-country skis anymore. And I asked my knee doctor, I said, can I go downhill skiing? And he looked at me and went, well, he didn't say no.
I don't think I would.
One this fall.
But
Yeah.
but it'll hurt
Well, I
when
think
you
the same
fall.
thing on the bicycle, you know, I think if I were to fall on the bicycle, that wouldn't be good either. So,
I know, I'm always
Yeah,
thinking,
better
should I
chances
both
of staying
knees
upright on the
replaced?
bike, though.
you
And
do.
if I feel like I'm gonna fall, I'm like, oh no, you know.
Well, I'm a good enough skier that unless someone runs into me, I hit a snowboarder once. This snowboarder was in front of me, and I don't know if you know how snowboarders ski, but they're sideways, so they have a blind side all the time, whereas a skier is skiing forward. A snowboarder is standing like this, the whole time and leaning back and forth. So if you come up on this side of him, he's not going to see you. Well, I had this snowboarder. There was hardly anyone on the mountain, and I was on my skis, and I was coming up on him, and he was over here, and he kept coming across the path like this, very slowly. And I thought we were running out of real estate, and I thought surely he's going to cut and go back this way. And he kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, and finally at the last minute I thought, I'm going to have to move to the left to avoid him. And right then he cut. And boom, we hit each other and we both went down, and he was dazed. I got up and I said, we skiers don't like snowboarders. We don't like snowboarders because of that.
That's like my daughter, she was body surfing in the ocean one day. And when you're body surfing, you can't, control exactly where you're going, And
No,
so
you can't.
Here come three ladies walking along with ankle deep in the water, and so on. And she took them out, and she gets up and she says, "Oh, I am so sorry." She said, "But I couldn't get stopped, and so on." And the one lady, she said, looked at her and she says, "Honey, this is the best fun we've had all day."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
So I can appreciate what you said about the snowboarder.
I don't think he was having fun,
I was gonna
and
say.
I wasn't having fun, but I was angry at him, and I thought, you're taking up the whole mountain. He literally was taking up the whole mountain, and you were anticipating what he was going to do, and
Yeah. And like you say,
Snowboarders need to have signals.
there are in Utah, when we lived in Utah, this is where it happened, and there are ski resorts in Utah that will not allow snowboarders. It's only for skiers because of that. So this was Snow Basin, which is the mountain right in Ogden, Utah, and Snow Basin was the Olympic. Back when the Olympics were in Utah, it was the men and women's downhill. So I used to ski from the very top of now I can't say the John Paul lift. And that mountain, that's it right at 10,000 feet. And the first, I didn't do the first 400 to 500 yards of the run, because you got up to the top of John Paul, and there was another part of the run that was 400 or 500 yards, and it was straight up. And but I skied the rest of the mountain down. It was a black run. But you had to take another lift from that spot to go those 400 or 500 yards. And I rode the gondola up there, and then I rode it back down. Because when you got up there, I'm not exaggerating, folks. You literally had a ridge about as wide as this table, with sheer drop-offs on either side, to go from maybe here to the front door, to get to where you start to ski down. And when you started to ski down, it was a straight drop. They said that that's where the Olympics started on that run, and went all the way to the bottom. Well, I started 400 or 500 yards down at the bottom of this, and then skied the rest of the mountain, which was all black run. But at the very top, they said you were doing Olympians were doing 80 to 90 miles an hour within 3 seconds. Within 3 seconds. So, yeah, it was that steep. So it's very steep. So I skied everything on that mountain except that spot.
Good choice.
So now it would be a sure, what's the word I want?
Concussion.
Well, yeah, that's what I was inferring. Or no longer having legs. Something to that effect. Well, it's past time. We need to start. Well, glad you're here. We're a small group today. People are losing interest or just out doing their own
Jim and
thing.
Jean are gone.
Yeah, I think they were gone
Yeah.
for the weekend, yeah. So,
Yeah, they're going for
Um,
makers.
I don't know if we'll go the whole hour and a half. I mean, to me, this chapter doesn't warrant a lot of discussion, but what
I
do you
found
think?
it confusing.
You thought it was confusing?
Yes,
Um,
I thought it was a lot of words
yes.
to make a
yeah.
point, and, you know,
Well, he just gives a bunch of examples kind of at first, and he really doesn't even start getting into the meat of stuff
Yep.
until about 9 pages after he started.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and
Um,
he keeps repeating the same thing.
yeah,
I was gonna
yeah.
say,
redundant.
do you think he's conceited, or is it just me?
I think he comes from a totally different theological perspective
Yeah,
that is foreign to liturgical Christians.
Okay.
You're so kind. You should have been diplomatic.
Well, pastors kind of are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I've gleaned some insights from this book, but I think there needs to be intentionality to living your Christian life, period. Not just doing your spiritual gifts or living an abundant life, I mean. But to be a Christian in general, I think it implies some intentionality. It's like in a marriage. If there's no intentionality of being faithful and putting the other person first in your marriage, your marriage at best is going to be poor, and and uh, and probably in most cases not survive. But it may take 5 years, it may take 20 years, but sooner or later, without any intentionality and putting the other person first, marriages are doomed to fail. So it's the same thing in Christianity. If you go about your life living kind of haphazardly in your Christian faith, um, your faith probably is going to have much impact on your life, and you're going to be unfulfilled as a Christian, and probably an Easter and Christmas Christian at best. So I think from the vantage point that he's talking here throughout this book about having some intentionality in your Christian walk towards giving yourself every opportunity to live the abundant life that Jesus is talking about, I think there's some value in this book. But I think he's also making it more complicated than it really is. Uh, I think all of us, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I think all of us are living the abundant life if we believe in Jesus and love Jesus and are regular, seeking ways to serve Jesus through our church and outside of church. But having an abundant life doesn't mean that all your problems are going to go away. We still live in this what's the word I want? Temporal world, that's not the word I'm looking for, but imperfect world, this finite world, and we're talking about stuff that's infinite. But the thing is we do these things in our Christian life, in our Christian faith, as we live in community with one another, we do grow, and we do experience a foretaste of that feast that will be the ultimate abundance of life, heaven. You know, am I all wet, or do you see, understand what I'm trying to say? You know?
Basically, you're saying we're living the abundant life. We just don't know or aren't realizing what we're doing.
Well, and I think to some extent, this came up a few weeks ago, maybe it was even last week, when you've been raised in the faith, and it doesn't have probably quite the impact on you day to day that someone who's new to the faith. It's like when you've been in love for 50 years, wow factor may be gone, but when you first fall in love, the wow factor is definitely there. But the love, even though the wow factor may go away, the depth of the love grows. So
I don't want to criticize that it's gonna come across that way, but, if you've ever been to an evangelist, presentation and the altar call at the end,
oh yeah.
I mean, it's all emotion, it's all passion, it's, well, for me, guilt, or, oh dear,
Mhm.
I'm not, I'm not good enough, I'm not a Christian if I don't go up there.
Mhm.
Those kind of things come into play.
Mhm.
And that cannot be sustained, and to me, it's nothing more than just emotional and,
Drama.
yeah, drama,
No,
there you go.
Christ
I mean,
intended
for
for
some
us to have
people,
that
it's
drama.
what they need to get them started, but
I think you correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But I think most Christians, whether they've been raised in the faith or not, there's some point in their life where the rubber hits the road and their faith really takes a major turn. And their faith all of a sudden makes more of a difference in their life. So you can call it an altar call or whatever. I don't know what you would call it, but um, I mean, sometimes it's a death in the family, sometimes it's a birth in the family, sometimes it's a marriage, sometimes it's your child reaching a certain level, and all of a sudden the reality of your faith and God and the meaning of all of it just seems to come together. Um,
I think that happens sometimes when you realize your mortality too.
yeah, yeah. I think that's very true.
it's kind of wonderful hindsight, though. If you look back on your life, and the longer that picture is, the more you can see
Hmm.
the worth, the worthiness of Christ, the beauty of Christ, whatever you want to say, and how
Hmm.
Christ, God, impacted your life.
Hmm. I'll share my story with you. I've not talked about this here so much, but so I was born and raised in a Lutheran church, Grace Lutheran Church in Houston, Texas. Went to church every Sunday. We sat in the same pew every Sunday. I always took church at a very early age, very seriously, and um, I don't know if it was what my parents and my grandparents' influence, but I always thought there was something special about church, something special about going into the presence of God, from the earliest I can remember. Okay, uh, and then I went to confirmation, and I took confirmation very seriously. We had a test in confirmation every single Saturday. Confirmation went from 9 to 12 every Saturday for a year, and we had a test every Saturday.
Did you
Okay?
have a test in front of the congregation?
We didn't do that,
Okay.
but there was a written test every week. I don't remember the pastor asking us. A lot of people did.
Yeah, Larry had to go through
Yeah,
that.
but I don't remember that. Um, and so, but still, I would say for me, now I'm not trying to put this on anybody else, but for me, I would still say, even though all this was happening and it was very genuine and real, for whatever word you want to use, um, and I went with friends to Church of Christ and Baptist churches growing up in Texas, that because they're all over the place. And Church of Christ are a lot like Baptist, except they think they're the only ones going to heaven, and they don't use any instruments at all in worship. They sing a cappella, but boy, can they sing. So I experienced numerous altar calls over the, and out of obligation, sometimes I felt a need to go forward multiple times whenever I go to these churches. But nothing ever still felt like, I don't, it's still, but then I got confirmed. When that's really, for us in Lutheran circles, that's really when that aha moment happens, and theoretically, okay, that aha moment happens, and we come to the realization that I believe this stuff, and I want to follow Jesus, and I'm going to serve Jesus the rest of my life. That's really what confirmation. It's the Lutheran altar call, but it's heady more than going to a Baptist church and having the heady call. But here's what I'm getting at. So then at about that time, I started going to church camp every summer. Church camp changed my life. And when I was in confirmation, my godparents, my aunt and uncle, my aunt is still living, gave me a book by Pat Boone. And it was called A New Song. And I read that book. I still have it. I haven't ever read it again, but I'm going to at some point. I read that book, and at the end, I can still see it. I was in my bedroom at home, and I got down on my knees afterwards, and I prayed the prayer. I was confirmed. I totally felt like my life changed at that moment. My attitude, my understanding of God, my desire to serve God, my love for God totally changed in that moment.
How old were you then?
12,
13.
I was 12 when I was confirmed. I was confirmed in May on Pentecost, and everyone else was in 7th grade. If I had been 3 weeks older, I would have been a grade ahead. So I was the youngest one in the confirmation class, but everyone else was. So I got confirmed in May. I'm not sure when I read the book, but I'm guessing it was over the summer months. I turned 13 in September, so right in that ballpark of age. So 52, 53 years ago. And I realize that not everybody has that kind of experience,
I was gonna say,
and it's
you're so lucky to
and
know.
it's okay. It's okay. But that's what I was trying to say earlier, that I think we all have those kinds of aha moments when God becomes very real to us, and it might be in a death, it might be in a birth, it might be in wedding, and it might be so subtle in a way too that we might not even be totally aware of it. We are aware of it, but not in the full context at the moment. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say there?
Yes.
So, but for me, that moment, that was a deciding moment where I could say my life changed at that moment, even though my life was very much on that trajectory the whole time. And maybe I wouldn't have gotten there if it hadn't been for that trajectory. I don't know. It doesn't mean that my life is perfect. It doesn't mean that I haven't sinned. It doesn't mean that, you know, um, everything's been hunky-dory over the last 50 plus years. But for me, that was a moment when I took very seriously the relationship that God had established with me in baptism, and knew that my life was going to be altered because of this. So, and so there's been an abundance in the midst of all the stuff in my life that has not been perfect over the year. My dad died when I was 10 years old. I mean, that's terrible for anybody to go through. So, and there's other things I could point to. So life hasn't been perfect, but there is an abundance in in just holding on to the promises, you know? And that's true for all of us. There's an abundance in just, I mean, can you imagine living your life without faith? There's an abundance there. Yes,
And
Andy.
the older you get, the more, like you said, the more you can look back
Hmm.
on the blessings that you have been blessed with.
And you realize the abundance as you look
Yep.
back. And maybe that's your
Absolutely.
aha moment.
It could be, I think in my case, I had several aha moments.
Mhm.
Now, not big, you know, but several along the way that helped me grow in my faith.
Mhm.
And so on. And now at my age, as I look back, I realize how blessed my life has been.
Mhm.
And it's strictly due to God.
Mhm. And I think as you look back, and I said this the very first week, and I haven't heard him talk about this as of yet. I don't know if he's going to, but I really think, folks, the 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 number one thing to do in order to live an abundant life is not to go through all this formula so much per se. I think the intentionality is good, which is what he's talking about, but I really think it's really about stopping every day and just considering what you have, not what you don't have, but what you have, and being grateful for it. I think gratitude is a huge piece to living an abundant life. Um, and what Renee said in her sermon yesterday, about prayer, she said, don't think about what you can't do in prayer, but what you can do. Um, so um, I think just being grateful for what you have really alters how we look at life and um, the abundance that we have, in that life, um, and how God is in the midst of all of that, you know.
I don't remember, but I don't think that he has said any place in the book or emphasized each person's personal relationship with God, because each one has a different relationship, a different way of praying, a different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've read that.
I don't think you have. Yeah.
Well, I feel guilty going to church all my life, but I still feel like I'm a big sinner. And,
We are.
you know, but
I didn't want to say anything, but No, what do you mean you feel guilty though? What do you mean you feel guilty?
well, that I'm not more religious and more believing, than I am. I guess I just kind of take it for granted,
I think Jesus would say, you don't need to be religious. And the Pharisees were religious. Um, it's about where your heart is, and uh, and again, I think when you realize that when for all of us, when you realize that I do not understand it, but man, does God loves me in spite of who I am, and that ain't going to change. No matter what I do or don't do, that isn't going to change. I mean, I really, that's the biggest question I have for God, I think. I've got a lot of questions for God when I get up to the pearly chocolate gates. But why do you love everybody so much? Everybody. Because there's a pastor, I look at some of you and I go, I don't know
Why
if
does
I
a
can
parent
love
love a
you.
child?
Exactly. Yeah.
And each child is different,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Some of them do real good and some of them don't.
Yeah.
But as
And
a
you love the
parent-
child. You may not always love the behavior, but you love the
Right.
child.
Right, right.
And so, you know, you have nothing to feel guilty about. I mean, you're a human being. God created you the way you are, and God loves you the way you are. And it's not about being religious. It's really, if anything, it's just about being grateful. Wow. In spite of myself, God loves me. And there's the abundant life. Wow, I am loved. I am accepted no matter what. You know, and then how can you not but want to respond when you feel that kind of, when you feel love from your spouse, how can you not want to love that spouse back? You know, I mean, it's hard, and that's a poor example compared to the love that God has for us. So how can you not but respond? And it's in the responding that you find abundant life. It's in the giving that you find the abundant life. And I think as you love God, as you express, as you become more aware of the gratitude that is in your life, God shows you what to do. And it doesn't have to be rocket science. It doesn't have to be Mother Teresa. It's simply by being there for the people that God puts in your path.
Yes, Mr. Teacher.
That's the abundant life. In my mind, that's the abundant life. So I largely disagree with this guy, but I do think the intentionality that he's talking about in here is important. So, and I think the passion needs to be there, and the gifts, recognizing that we all have different gifts, as Judy said, and we all pray differently, and we all think differently, and you know, that's what makes life so rich.
My congregation is on a pastoral search, and in the meantime, they've developed a team. Fortunately, for a small congregation, we have numerous pastors in the congregation, so they've put together a team. But a few weeks ago, the Christian Ed director delivered the message, and she was talking about how when she was in her early 20s, she really had an eye-opening experience. She had a toddler, and she was trying to paint, and as much as she tried to barricade the toddler, 3 times the toddler got into the paint. And she said every time she got so upset with her. And she said even after the 3rd time of getting so upset that she got in the paint again, which really was the mother's fault because she wasn't barricading her well.
Of course it was.
And she said she really saw Jesus in that moment, because no matter what, the toddler still came back and still loved her and wanted to kiss on her, and you know, no matter how upset she was, you know, the toddler. And she said, I felt like that was Jesus talking through her toddler, like, no matter what you do to me, I still love you, I still want you. And she said that was like altering for her.
Yeah, there you go. There's an aha moment. Yeah. So yeah, we all have different aha moments, and you know, there's no right one to have. So
I said earlier, I thought he just uses a lot of words to say all these things, but there are a few seeds in here that one can find if one is really looking. But the book, so far as a whole, has not.
it's been a little disappointment to me too. But you know, when I decided, I think I've said this to you before, when I decided that I wanted to have a discussion about this topic, there wasn't a lot out there to read. So.
You can write a book while you're at Fort Knox.
Oh yeah, maybe I can. That's more Renee's forte than mine.
She
I
can
can't
edit- she
sit
can
down.
edit.
I can barely sit down long enough to write a sermon, much less a book. I don't. Oh. Renee's much more whatever side of the brain that is than I am. She's the studious person in the family. I'm the talker. So I'll talk to a tree.
Well, then you
So-
get a recorder and you write your book
Yeah,
that way.
that's true. That's true. Yep.
We'll read it.
Yeah. You're really that desperate, huh?
This gentleman is very talented
Mhm.
in many respects, but I sometimes have the feeling that he's talking up here to me,
Mhm.
you know, beyond my comprehension.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, he has put some thoughts in my mind in this book.
Well, but this has been successful.
Right.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed, you
Yeah.
know, whatever I've read in here, but sometimes I do not understand where he's going,
Yeah.
you know.
You know, the thing that, you know, this just from what you just said, this just popped into my head. But I think maybe partly what he's trying to communicate here in this book, when he talks about family, faith, and vocation, you know, what he's really, I mean, what I think he might be talking about, but throughout the whole thing, is about living a life of authenticity. That our Christian life, our faith, has to affect not just us on Sunday morning, but every aspect of our life. And so it needs to integrate itself into the family and into our religious life, our Christian community, faith, and in our jobs. You know, if we're totally different type of person at work than we are at home with our family, there's something not right there. There's a lack of authenticity of who we were called to be and who we are meant to be. I think, in a sense, I could interpret what he's saying there. And so, as you're seeking to live the abundant life, or as you're seeking to be a faithful Christian, your true self, your true essence, needs to be the same in each area. Not one thing to one group of people and another thing to another group of people. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I think he's saying that throughout the book, but he's never come right out and said that. He's never used the word authenticity, but he's certainly applying these principles in each category. So.
I like when he listed the gifts that people looked at as gifts that are not considered spiritual gifts.
Yeah, what
They
page
go.
is that on?
It's on 205. All the gifts they listed that had nothing to do with their biblical gifts. Sense of humor and friendly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is what he says, and this whole section is what he's talking about in terms of why we don't hear much about spiritual gifts in the church, because mainline churches have left it pretty much to charismatics. We're scared of it. We're scared of anything that uses the word spirit or spiritual. It seems as though in liturgical churches, what Luther defines Lutherans, which he would have never called us Lutherans, but what he defines us as is second article Christians. And what I mean by that is that there are three articles to the Apostles' Creed: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, if you remember your confirmation. So we're big on the second article, the one about the Holy Spirit, about Jesus Christ. But we don't really delve too much into the first article as God, we shy certainly away from the third article of the Holy Spirit. It's mystical. We don't understand it. We get uncomfortable about it. We think that we can't be spiritual because only spiritual people speak in tongues. Well, there are many gifts to the Spirit, as Paul talks about in Galatians, and speaking in tongues is at the bottom of the list. But for some reason in our culture, we've thought, oh, if we're spiritual, we've got to be speaking in tongues. So that scares the bejeebers out of us. So we've left spiritual gifts to be left to the charismatics. And then the next one, he says, spiritual gifts have not been taught. He goes on to talk about that. And then on 206, spiritual gifts have been isolated to the physical confines of the church.
Yeah.
So we don't use spiritual gifts outside of church. So when churches have done your time and talent resources, that sheet, it's all these things you can do at church, like sing in the choir or serve as an usher or serve on an altar guild or serve in Sunday school teacher or whatever, but it's not ever reflected about how to use your gifts out in the real world. So then on page 210, he talks about all the spiritual gifts, or the so I wrote down here beside it, just for some conversation. It goes from 210 all the way to 212. Which one speaks to you? Did you consider those as you read through this chapter at all?
Yeah.
So, and
I-
there's no
and it
right or
may
wrong
be-
answer here. I'm just asking a general
It
question.
may be that there's a little bit of in more than one.
Absolutely.
I think I found myself in administration, not like Bill was an administrator, but ability to organize. I found that in some parts, in teaching, but a lot since I've been on the service committee,
I was gonna say,
as well as creative communications.
I think Louisa strongly shows the ability of serving. Gotta dispute you, Louisa, that one's there too.
Okay, I'll put that one in. But I looked really at creative communications ability.
Oh, I don't disagree with those others, I just,
And before more of us talk, a week or two ago, he talked about how our spiritual gifts may be different from things that we're good at or like to do. I disagree with him. I think anything that you're good at, anything that you like to do, if you do it to the glory of God, whether it's in church or outside of church, I think you are sharing your gifts with other people and finding fulfillment. I think. So if you're good at it, there's a reason you're good at it. And God made you the way you are. So why is that not necessarily a gift? I don't follow him there, but but you can, like I told you the story a few weeks ago about the guy in my congregation years ago. He's a big old strapping guy, made me look like a shrimp. He was way taller than me and broader than me, and he was probably in his mid to late 30s at the time. And his name was John. I can't remember his last name anymore. I can see him as clear as day. But he was a widower. His wife had died while he was serving, while they were members at our church. And I did the funeral, and he had 2 little children. And I preached a sermon on spiritual gifts. And he came up to me after worship and he said, Pastor David, I'd love to share my spiritual gifts, but I have no idea what to do. I said, well, John, what do you like to do? And he said, well, I like to hunt and fish. And I said, well, John, do you know how many people in this congregation might have some desire to do that, or might like just to know how to do that, or how to even shooting a gun properly and responsibly, that as a Christian brother you could share and interact with and build relationships with over doing that kind of thing? I think that's sharing your spiritual gift.
Didn't you tell about him some other?
I did in this class
Was it in
a
this
while
classroom? I
back,
don't remember whether
a
it
few
was a
weeks
sermon or what.
for
Yeah,
a few
okay.
weeks ago. So again, it doesn't. You don't have to be Mother Teresa.
Uh-uh.
It's just it's connecting with people to the glory of God and building relationships. I mean, who knows what kind of relationships and conversation can happen as you're fishing. What do you think about God doing this, or what do you think? Where do you think God is in this? As you're just sitting there very casually talking, that's you know.
And I think God leads you in certain paths and you think, you know, what's this, and so on. I can give you an example. When my daughter was very young, she wanted a chicken to raise chickens.
Oh, okay.
And she still
I would
does.
just want a chicken to eat,
She
but
did, she still does, by the way. And she's in her 50s.
okay.
But my father at the time he could do anything with materials, and so. And he said, well, I can build her a chicken house. And he said, in fact, I have some 6-pane windows that we'll put in the front of the chicken house so they have, sun. And he said, then we'll make a back that you just lift up and reach in and get the eggs out. Sounded good. He said, now you can caulk the windows. I said, Dad, I don't know how to caulk windows. He said, I'll show you. So he did, and I caulked the 6-pane windows. And he built a wonderful chicken house for her. And I thought, now what in the world would I ever use that for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold.
After Katrina, Lou Lerdick and his wife and I went down to help down there. Guess who caulked windows?
There you go.
And learned to drywall.
Yep.
I mean, you don't realize at the time you're going into a situation.
Yep.
That how that might lead on down the road.
Exactly. It's that ripple effect.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yet there's
God can use anything that we do down the road.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's
And part of the living the abundant life again is recognizing that. Maybe not at the moment
that's it.
when you're learning to put the caulk in the chicken coop, but down the road, wow,
Yeah.
this is why God had me learn this.
Yeah.
I was thinking about a book that I read. It's called The Prayer for Owen Meany. And the whole book is like that. This kid does all these strange things. This little kid with this squeaky voice, and he does all these weird things. And in the end, they all come to fruition. And it's all about saving someone's life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, looking at this list of gifts with definitions, we aren't big givers of the church, but I find the easiest one there is giving or contributing money to the church,
Mm-hmm.
which we do regularly. We're right up to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes almost, well, it's Saturday night, I'm going to church tomorrow, so I get the money out and put it in the envelope, and then I guess I assume I've done my duty for the week.
Yeah.
I think you're being too judgmental.
Yeah. I think if you look back on your life in a week's time, you would see other things that maybe you have contributed to somebody else that has really helped, and you may not know it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
You may not know that you have done anything.
Let me tell you a story. So when we were living in Utah, a woman shared a story with me. She didn't share it publicly, but this woman had a lot of problems. And she came into my office numerous times to talk about things. And she came in one day, and I don't remember the whole how it led up to this story or whatever, but the bottom line was the woman told me that she was at her wit's end at this one point in her life, and she was going to commit suicide, and she had prayed and prayed for God to show her some sign not to commit suicide, and nothing seemed to ever be happening. So one day she finally decided, okay, this is the day I'm going to do it. And God was silent during all of this, or at least from her perspective. And so I don't remember how she was going to commit suicide. I think she was going to take pills. But she was at the medicine cabinet, or I'll say it that way because again I don't remember exactly what she was going to do. But she was in the act of getting herself together to do what she was going to do to herself. And the phone rang. And it was Rhonda Huffager, a member of the congregation. And Rhonda called, and she didn't answer the phone. And Rhonda left a message on the phone. So and so, I'm calling because I'm concerned about you. I haven't seen you in a while, and I miss you. She didn't commit suicide. That was her message from God. You don't know what you do, how it might affect somebody. The woman, as far as I know, Rhonda never knew that she saved this woman's life, just simply by making a phone call and leaving a message.
Well, I think,
God is more active in our lives than any of us take or realize. Go ahead.
well, I think Bonnie alluded to it on other session, being in education and with the internet, and I think I mentioned this before, all of a sudden you hear from somebody who, I don't remember ever doing that, or,
Yeah.
but there's a relationship there that was established, which you never knew you had done.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And, I guess that's the fulfillment of teaching.
I think someday you'll know. When you get to heaven, I think your whole life you'll see how God was in the midst of it, and and the things that God gave you the ability to do and made a difference in people's lives. But we just trust that the Spirit is at work in us as we live out our lives of faith. And sometimes we're going to find out that we did something worthwhile. A lot of times we don't. Rhonda didn't find out. She may know by now. I don't know, but she didn't know at the time.
That woman may have told her at some point.
She might have, yeah. But
It would be nice to be able to tell people how they have helped you. I have several people in my life that I wish I could have told
mhm.
how they affected my life.
They're no longer living. You know what?
The one in particular that I'm.
You know what I
thinking
would
of.
recommend you to do? I would write them a letter. Okay?
Okay.
And then I would take that letter and I would take it to a fire or something like that, maybe a bonfire, or if you have a fire pit in the backyard, or just get a big old metal can and light it on fire and put it in the can and let it go up to heaven.
Good. That's an idea.
Yep. It's a way to let them know. And then you've had an intentional time to think about what you wanted to say as you wrote it out. So, yeah.
I think when Jim said the other week, at people's funeral services, how you find out so many things. And like at my mom's service, I learned things that I didn't know about my mom. And at my husband's service this year, his son said like he learned things about his dad that he had done for people that he never knew. And I got some letters from people that he worked with of things that he did for people that I never had a clue. Like, got people out of jail or on work release and, things that I never knew he had done that. So
Yeah, it's
It's
unfortunate we don't learn about it
It's a
until.
shame these things happen, at the death of somebody, and
Yep.
that, you haven't expressed that with them, while they were living.
Your wife, put a thought in my mind about keeping a prayer journal.
Mhm. I was just going to bring that up. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is something also that I am going to be looking into.
And another approach to it is keep a gratitude journal, and those become things that you pray about, expressing your gratitude to God for in prayer of
Absolutely.
of various things that happen to you. And I was going to say in relation to all that too that that maybe give you a homework assignment this week, okay, other than reading, and maybe take 5 minutes every day and sit down and write out different things each day that you're grateful for.
is that what you mean by a prayer journal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Prayer journal, you'd write down prayer concerns of people
Yeah,
that
yeah.
has
I mean, but
anything really.
why couldn't they be together?
They could. It's really anything that you feel a need that you want to remember and talk to God about, whether it's praying for somebody else, whether it's a prayer concern of your own, whether it's something I'm really grateful for this person in my life, or grateful that a certain thing happened in my life, write it down. And what this woman that Renee talked about in her sermon yesterday was months had gone by, and this woman came and asked my wife, "How is your dad doing?" And my wife didn't even know. She used the word Bob, which was his name, and Renee didn't know who in the heck she was talking about. She was thinking Bob in the church. Who is Bob?
In the
Bob.
congregation,
Is there
yeah.
some Bob that I don't know about in the church? She wasn't thinking about her father. She was thinking about Bob in the church. And finally the woman said, "Well, your dad, you talked about it 3 months ago at the women's retreat, and I've been praying for him every day, and I've never asked her how he's doing." Boggled Renee's mind, that she not only remembered, but that she'd been praying all these days. And Shirley was that kind of person, the woman in the story. Shirley really was. I've never met anybody like that in terms of prayer life. She was incredible. She wasn't raised a Lutheran. That tells you something right there.
I remember one
I don't know
time-
what she was, but she was a faithful follower. She was at every book study, Bible study, worship service, everything, and she was always talking about prayer. Go ahead.
I remember one time, I think it was Pastor Revere, went through something on how to pray or what, how to form a prayer. And one of the things that she said was start a prayer with thanks.
Mhm.
And ever since I do that every night, every day.
Mhm.
Think about what am I thankful for today.
Mhm.
Also
It's gratitude.
in a women's retreat that we had, we made little gratitude jars.
Mm-hmm. I still
which
have mine.
Yeah, I do too. I have
It's in
it
my
on my,
kitchen. Yeah.
I have mine on my
You
dresser.
you take for
And you
granted.
take a slip of paper and
Yeah.
Anything you're
Yeah.
thankful for, you put it in.
It might seem a little silly on the surface, but we live our lives every day, and there's so many blessings in life that we don't even think about it. But the fact that you just took a breath, that's a blessing. That there's just a lot of stuff that and then when you become grateful for all that all that happens throughout and even tragedy, um, I'm convinced, and this is not a commentary on my father at all, okay? So don't hear it that way. But I'm convinced that I don't know that I would be a pastor today if my father hadn't died when I was 10 years old. I think God didn't want my father to die when I was 10 years old, but I think God used that opportunity. And the way that people reached out to me in my congregation and at the funeral service, and the opportunities that relationships that developed because of that over the next number of years really shaped me. And I think God used that experience. I know my dad was an alcoholic. That's what killed him. There was a man in my first call who I was very close to. He was a tough, and forgive me for saying this, but he was a SOB. No one liked him. He was crude, he was rude, he was blunt, but he had a heart of gold. He just didn't let anybody see it. And he was a recovering alcoholic. And I was new at the church. I was right out of seminary, and the secretary there was someone out cutting the grass at the church. I said to the secretary, "Who's that out there cutting the grass?" She said, "Oh, that's Bob." So I went out to thank Bob for cutting the grass. And I developed this relationship with Bob. He was almost like a second father to me. He helped me do all kinds of projects that I didn't know how to do in the next 3 years while I lived there. And not months, just months before I left, he went into, he fell off the wagon. He started drinking after 17, 18 years. His wife called me, "Pastor David, can you come over? Bob's drunk and I need help." And I sat there for a number of hours with him, and ended up, we called a rehab place, but they couldn't admit him until later in that day. So I sat there all day with them, keeping him under control until I could take him up to the rehab place later. I had no idea what I was doing. I was green. I was in my 20s. I had no idea what I was doing. And I took him up to rehab. I took him up to rehab. I can still see the place. We walked into the lobby. We started registering him to go in, and he wouldn't have gone with anybody else but me. Mm-hmm. And something happened at registration that ticked him off, and he said, "I am not going to stay here. I'm not going in." And okay, this was January in Minneapolis. It's 30 below zero outside. And so he got up and walked out, went out the front door and out just out the side the doors in the causeway or whatever you want to call it. And he stood there. You know what I did? I went and sat down in the lobby. I knew he wasn't going to last long out there. And I had the keys. So I went and sat down out in the lobby for about 10 minutes. He comes back in, and I said, "I'm not taking you home, Bob. You're going to stay here." And so he went. He had calmed down, and I took him back in, and we got the registration worked out. It was something stupid, but it was easy to fix. And he went into rehab, and he was sober till the day he died. And if I hadn't had, I was very open in my first call, particularly about my dad dying and my dad's alcoholism and all that. And had I not done that, had I not had that experience in my life, I don't think I would have had the credibility to take him. God uses all kinds of experiences for what we don't even know down the road. Did God want my dad to die? Did God want my dad to be an alcoholic? No. I don't believe that for a second, but I do think God used that opportunity in my life to make a difference for somebody else.
And I guess we maybe have it used in us until the day we die.
Say that again?
I think that some of the things that we have learned in life
Oh,
through God,
yeah.
we will use until the day we
Yeah.
die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is nice to know. In some ways, God's with us every day.
Yeah, he is. I firmly believe it. The fact that you just took a breath.
Well, hearing you speak, I think your grandparents had a big influence on your
Oh, they
life,
did.
too.
They did. Yeah. Yeah. My home congregation they're not there anymore. That church is not there anymore. It's gone. But their legacy lives on. And they did. I do not know of another family when I was a kid. There could have been, but I do not know another family in the congregation whose parents were divorced. Because this was the 60s, early 60s, you know. But that congregation, those people, they all knew me. And I can still tell you many of their names, you know. And they were incredibly supportive to me and kind to me. And yeah, I think they had a huge shaping in collectively and individually for my life. So that's what happened yesterday in baptism. When you make those promises to, you know, May Elizabeth, you know, you and I said it. You do these things by providing, if nothing else, a place for community, a place for learning, a place for worship. You do that. You do that in your offerings by you support this place so that May Elizabeth has a place to come and learn about the grace of God in her life.
I think Bob contributed a lot to you as well.
You did.
Your dealings with him
Yeah, he did.
must have given you a sense.
And folks, you have. You know, it's a continuous story. It's a continuous cycle. You have been an incredibly gift. You have been an incredible gift to me and Renee, this church. You know,
And you've been quite a gift to us.
well,
Right.
I wasn't looking for, you know,
No, I know.
but seriously, thank you. But you have. So that's living the abundant life, folks. So what I was going to say, and Sandy was talking about it, you know, maybe your homework assignment this week should be take 5 minutes every day, sit down, and write out some things that you're thankful for each and every day. I mean, you don't have to be, you can be redundant because some things are just in place, but maybe experience something. Last night I was sitting on my back patio looking out across my yard into my neighbor's and my next door neighbor's yard of that. And I just was overwhelmed with how beautiful it was. You know, all those fall colors and the flowering plants that are the colorful plants. And, you know, it's just beautiful, you know. And if you don't stop and smell the roses, you miss them, you know. So that's what I'm talking about. Maybe writing down things that you often take for granted. But thinking about it, being intentional about it, might help you be more grateful. And I would also say, and the other part of the homework assignment is, and anyone who's watching, you do the same thing, is tell at least one person this week that you're in a relationship with, that you love them and you're grateful for them, and why you're grateful. Could be your spouse, it could be a child, it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend, it can be anybody, you know, but just one person. Don't take it for granted that they know, because they may not know, or they may not know the depth of your gratitude for them. So
Can
So-
we put down something in our book that we're thankful for if it happened yesterday?
absolutely.
I had something strange happen. Many of you, if you have sliding glass doors, sometimes, even though you might have something pasted on, as I do, to keep birds from going into them.
Yeah, we had a bird fly into our window yesterday. Yeah.
Well, I was sitting on, soaking up some sunshine yesterday, and a bird flew into my sliding glass door off the patio. And the cat, my darling cat, got it
Oh no.
and took off with it. Well, I
Oh.
chased him down into the yard, got the bird out of his mouth, and he was
Yeah,
sort
stunned.
of like that.
Yeah, double
I brought
stunned.
him up on the patio, and I held him in my hand. Now, I'm not sure what kind it was. It could have been either a female goldfinch or a young goldfinch. It
Okay.
had yellow on it, that's the
Okay.
only. And I petted it, prayed mightily, and so on. Well, pretty soon, its eyes started, and it started to move its head, which is usually what happens, they break their neck,
Yeah,
At least I
yeah,
think that's
yeah,
what happens.
yeah, yeah.
and so on. So finally, I took it and I put it over on the table,
Uh-huh.
and I petted it, talked to it, and so on. All of a sudden, it flew off. I didn't do it.
It might have just been in shock from the cat grabbing it, you know.
Well, both. Double
both,
shock,
you know,
yeah.
both from the hitting the door,
Well, that too,
window.
yeah.
But you
Yeah.
you were the grace that gave it the ability
But the cat would
and
have eaten it.
exactly, the safety to recover and
Yeah.
be able to fly off again.
But it wasn't me.
But you were an agent. You were an
Well,
agent.
agent.
It was God working through
Yeah.
you to care for
I
that
guess,
creature.
I guess.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that you don't forget real soon,
Yeah.
you know, and so on. It made my day.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a cool story.
Saved from the jaws of death.
I think, because the cat would have, and then brought it up to the door so I could see it.
We used to have bird feeders in our backyard. Renee's passion is, birds and taking
me
pictures of
too.
birds, and we had this one bird feeder off to the side of right off the edge of our patio, which goes to the side of our sliding glass door. And one day we were sitting out there watching the birds eat at this feeder, and all of a sudden here comes this hawk, grabs a bird and goes,
Yes.
keeps going. Yeah. And Renee, I could see the feathers were falling, and Renee, this was a year ago, and anyway, we took the bird feeder up. We haven't had one since.
Hawks are God's
Yeah.
children.
They are, and they need to eat, But Renee did not want to be an agent in helping
I
it.
don't want to witness it, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, well, go ahead.
I was gonna, this is an aside, but when you started talking about chickens, I grew up on a farm, okay?
Oh, okay.
And when you say chickens, I go, because they were my responsibility. But and you're talking about the chicken house. We got 100 pullets and 50 roosters came free each
Wow.
spring,
Wow.
babies. And there was one little they were all white. But there was one little rooster that had a few black feathers on him, and all of the other little chickens, now this is still the little fluffy balls, were picking at him. So he became my pet. And we put him in a bushel basket and put an old window screen on the top. Yeah, I mean, he grew and I took care of him, and he was my pet until he got big and mean. I mean, he followed me around like a puppy dog and everything until he started attacking everybody, and then he was done with. But when she said chickens, I sat here and went, Because I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
still.
And that's okay.
That's funny.
That's where
That's
I
God's gift
recycle
for
my
her, not for
And
me.
it is, it's her legacy, I guess.
Oh.
That's funny.
She used to take him rides in her bicycle basket.
Yeah, well, I never did that, but I mean, he followed me like a puppy dog. He was for a long time.
Hmm.
And I was, this is the size I was then. I was not a big kid.
There is I don't know if this is relevant or not, but there is a organization, for lack of a better word. I haven't heard of it here in Pennsylvania. I'm sure it exists, but it's an entity called Via de Cristo. Have you ever heard of Via de Cristo? Have you ever heard of Walk to Emmaus or Crescio?
Chrissy.
Crescio? Crescio is the Catholic version. Walk to Emmaus is the Methodist version. Via de Cristo, Way of Christ, is the Lutheran version. But it's a program, for lack of a better word, that sends people on adult retreats for a weekend, a long weekend, and you spend time thinking, reflecting from various speakers and small group discussions on the various ways of living out the Christian life. And for many adults, particularly ones who never went to church camp as a kid, it becomes their aha moment. And but the best part about Via de Cristo, I think, and you can do this without going to Via de Cristo, is finding 2, 3 other people who you relish a friendship with and respect their faith life, and get together with them once a week and for an hour and simply talk about how's it going, you know, what have I done this week, or what have you done this week that has been to the glory of God. You kind of hold each other accountable and encourage one another and support one another. That's the whole idea of, as that retreat ends and you go back into the real world, into your life, those small groups meet once a week. You could do it once a month. You could do it once every other week. You could do it however you want, but if you want to live an abundant life and be intentional about it, and you feel like you need some help, maybe finding a few friends to sit down with. As often as you find that you want to work together as a group, and how's it going? What have I done this week? What have you done this week to the glory of God? What mistakes have you made? You can come up with your own questions, but that's what they do in Via de Cristo. They have like 3 or 4 questions, and they just stick to those questions. So it's a little structured, I guess, maybe. But support groups are good. I mean, in a sense, that's what we're doing here, but this is a bigger thing. But, and that's what community in the church is all about. We hold each other accountable, we support one another, we help one another, and things happen. So it's worth thinking about. So
One thing about this group that I appreciate is there are some different people in it than I'm used to doing things with. Now, Louisa and I have been in service committee forever. And these two have been in Bible study, on Thursday mornings changed to Tuesday, for a long time, as well as Barb. But some of these others, I have not been in any kind of study or any kind of extra communication with. So.
Well, that's good.
You don't know what you're missing.
Well, I do now.
Yep. Yeah. Anything else? We didn't really talk directly about the chapter too much, but we did a little.
He would be disappointed.
We did a little bit. Well,
Yeah.
I think we broached it in the sense of, we all have gifts, and maybe the question is, and he talks about this in here, about where is it? I just saw it. Finding a spiritual director. Oh, here it is on page 215 under discuss. He says, seek a trusted advisor or a mentor who can help you talk about your spiritual gifts, and so what I was going to say is, if you want to have conversation about, I don't know what I'm doing, I heard Judy say to Louisa here a few minutes ago, Louisa, you're really good at service, and you're not giving yourself credit for that, So maybe what I'm getting at is maybe have a conversation with one other person, or maybe a series of people informally. Say, what do you see as gifts of mine? Maybe they'll see something that you're unaware of, that maybe then you can spend some time praying about. Well, I've never really thought about that. How can I use what these other people see in me to benefit your kingdom and fulfill my life? You understand what I'm saying? Just ask people, what do you see as a gift of mine? John, the big guy, he basically asked me and I told him. And had we had deeper and longer conversation and regular conversation, I'm sure, and had I known him even better than I did, I'm sure I could have told him other things as well. But on the surface, just from the little bit he told me, I told him how I thought those were gifts that he could use to the glory of God. So sometimes we need to ask other people, is what I'm getting at. And how do they see us? How do people perceive us? Maybe you don't want to know how people perceive you. I don't know.
Well, I think in Louisa's case, what she talked about with administration, organizing things and what have you, that facilitates her ability to serve.
Mm-hmm.
The two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anything else? Pretty good discussion today, even though we didn't really directly talk about the chapter. We did, but we didn't. We didn't break it down too much, but we talked about it. So next week, a couple of people have asked this last week to me, how many more sessions do we have? We have as many sessions as there are chapters, because we do a chapter a week. So next week, we've got 2 more sessions. We meet on the chapter 6 next week, and then the following week, chapter 7.
That's
Okay.
going to put it all together and say what he's been
He's going to say everything that I've been saying, man.
Yeah. And chapter, we should have just read chapter 7.
Maybe
Probably should have, yeah.
Authenticity's got to show.
And living an authentic life doesn't again mean that you're going to live a perfect life and you're going to be holier than thou and everything is going to be hunky-dory. It doesn't mean that. It means that to live an authentic life means that you begin your day thinking about God and how to serve God and throughout the day, and in little ways and maybe sometimes even in big ways, but that is your focal point every day of your life, is how can I serve God today? How can I love God today? How can I show God today that I love God? And it might just be a very simple thing that you do for somebody throughout the day that may not mean much to you, but may mean the world to them. But if you're not thinking about it, chances are much higher that you won't do any of that. You just putz through, and he talks about that earlier in the book, about just kind of putzing through life. He doesn't use that word, but you know. And so I do think what I value most about this book is the intentionality that he talks about living an abundant life, and more specifically, or more broadly maybe, living the Christian life. Don't just take it for granted. Don't just putz along day after day after day. Be intentional about how to love God and love the people that God puts in your life, and you'll live the abundant life.
There's more to it than that, though, that I was trying to, was it Bill or Bob? I don't remember which first name, that, you know, I mean, he was very intentional about what he was doing, and even, you know, went to seminary and became a pastor, and so, and it still wasn't the right avenue.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have to
That's where we need each
be
other to
quiet
help
and
us.
listen, and yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay. Should we have prayer?
Yep.
Yes.
We thank you, Lord God, for this day, for the chance to be together again as you give us opportunity every Sunday when we gather for worship, and now through this book study these past weeks. We thank you, dear Lord, that you have been present among us, that you have challenged us, that you have caused us to think, but most of all, that you have challenged us to live authentic and abundant lives based upon our gratitude for all that you have done for us. Help us, dear Lord, to be more expressive of those gifts that you have given us towards you and towards one another, that in all that we say and do may be to your glory. We ask and pray these things now in Jesus' holy name. Amen. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad you came. Enjoyed the conversation.